Good morning. Welcome to East by West Farms. Here we grow what we eat and eat what we grow. Today I'm going to show you what happens when you ignore your garden for several weeks. I'm at my home garden now. The story, of course, is we bought this farm about 1.5 hours from our home. And because of the COVID, we got to go to the farm more frequently and spend more time over there. And that means we spend less time at home. So in anticipation of that, back in April, I decided to turn this home garden into kind of the permaculture garden that needs minimum amount of work. And what we did is planted plants or vegetables that we know that does need a lot of attention, and set up the sprinkler and the drip irrigation system. Now it's August, almost end of August, so it's 4 or 5 months since we have done the initial work. It's kind of look like it's get taken over by squash. If you are living in a dry area, seems to be squash is the most drought tolerant. It's a great plant or family of vegetable that you can plant when you start a new garden. Here are some of the sweet potato vines. I believe that was recently planted from cutting, and they are still quite small. And this area actually doesn't get much water at all. It was quite dry. And then we have a ginger plant right next to a pineapple. Still in a big box, so they didn't seem to have much stress. And this area is quite shaded. They are not grown as vigorous as in the sun, but then they get burned by the sun. So it's kind of a balance between the shade and the sun. Here we have a pea tree that is voluntarily grown from the compost. And we got this, I believe these are the native cucumber that we didn't plant it. Maybe one of our neighbors planted 2 years ago, and last year we got a lot. This year they're just everywhere. I have some amaryllis here that didn't seem to grow much at all, and seems there's some bugs eating the leaves. So the amaryllis like sun. This place is too shady. The red bud has been growing quite well, and also it notice the trunk that have this natural cover. So it might be a good bonsai material, except that the leaves are pretty big. I like them because it has beautiful spring flowers. I'm not sure what this is. Here we have a Swiss chard plant. Look at the roots. This is amazing. That's a huge roots, and it's supposed to be. This is the first time I'm planting Swiss chard. Not necessarily my favorite vegetable, but I did find a way to cook it that I like. So, and it's supposed to be perennial, so if it survives the summer, probably in winter it should be okay. The leaves are just beautiful, so it would be a good candidate for as an edible ornament plant. Here we have some pomegranate that is still growing old, obsolete recycling bin. In the fall, after the leaves have dropped, I might dig them out and take to the farm and transplant it to the farm. The neighbor's bamboos are growing like crazy, and we don't particularly like the bamboo in our yard because they could, if they get to the foundation, they could damage the foundation. So we've been just chopping it off whenever we seen it. This is amorous plant. It looks much more, grows much healthier than the other one I've seen. And it's already setting seeds, so that is good. I will let it set seeds so that the seeds will germinating next year, so we can get a bunch of amaryllis over here. The idea of permaculture, or at least my consideration of permaculture, is I will plant a bunch of the same plant, amaryllis, all over the yard, and say which one take hold and which one doesn't. And the one take hold, that means that this location is good for this specific plant, and then they will set a seed and start to establish a colony over here. These are Madagascar spinach. They are a wild vegetable, and I didn't plant it here, but the story is several years ago. One of our neighbors gave us some Madagascar cuttings, and I planted, and they set this fruit, and then they come out every year. It's actually kind of down the driveway that I planted. I guess the fruit got here and self-germinated and established over here. So that's great, and it's actually right next to the arbor, so it will crawl up. This is supposed to be a very nutritious vegetable that with lots of minerals, and it's the texture tastes a little bit like okra with this slimy juice that I'm not necessarily a fan of. But it's very drought tolerant, and you cannot kill this plant. So far, I haven't shown you any fruits yet. So here is one. That's a wax melon. That you can see that there are lots of hairs on this, and it could get like 20-something pounds. So this one, I put my hand over here, so you can see how big it is already. I couldn't even get the whole thing in the picture. So it's probably 16, 18 inches long, and maybe 6 inches in diameter. This probably will last us for maybe 2-3 meals. It's very tasty. Some of you might recognize this plant, or the plant used to be. This is a type that I saved in the greenhouse through winter, and in spring I got some cutting from it. But the cutting didn't take because we had an unusually cool spring, and I moved it out of the greenhouse because and moved to the farm. That was a mistake because the weather was too cool. I didn't have enough water, and I didn't pay attention to it, so this plant died. But that's not a total loss. You can see, because I didn't harvest the Thai peppers, there were actually quite a few pepper plants that sprouted. So we will be able to keep these pepper plants going, I guess, with all these seedlings. You see the butternut squash, and that is probably the biggest success story of this year, is that we just have a tremendous amount of harvest on butternut squashes. I saw the watermelon plants. The leaves, of course, is very different from the butternut squash plant. But I just turned around and I saw that I did have a watermelon already. But that's unexpected. Along this strip, it's a thin strip, and my neighbor just built a new fence. So So what I plan to do is plant some apple trees over here and do the 2D planting, like the European style that have just two-dimensional fruit trees, apple trees, plums maybe, over here, until those trees get to big enough size. I'm just putting my jade tree and the bonsai collection over here because I run the drip irrigation from the faucet over there along this fence to the backyard over here. I have some jade tree over here. That's a bonsai, the native elm tree. And this is a peach tree bonsai, more jade trees. This is a pecan tree that the squirrel planted in the yard, and I dug it up and didn't have time to take to the farm. But even though it was in a very shallow pot, this pecan tree has been growing quite well. That's the chives, and it's already start to setting seeds. And that they can obviously sprout from seeds. So I'm glad that they established over here pretty well. And so I will expect this area is going to cover it with chives as the ground level. So that's good because chives, first of all, we eat lots of chives, and second of all, it's good insect propellant as well. So I have a whole cluster of chives that are growing pretty well over here. And that's a plum tree. It looks miserable, but it's still surviving. Hopefully it will outgrow it. Look like, well, actually it's not that dry. Here is our butternut squash collection. They are about past season already, but I can see that just in this strip of maybe 3 feet by 2 feet square or rectangular strip, I can see that I have at least a dozen of butternut squash over here. These butternut squash actually are growing from the seeds from the butternut squash I bought from Aldi. These again are the native cucumbers, I believe, and they basically took over this trellis. Suppose that you can eat the young fruit. You can see these are the young fruit you suppose that you can eat, and the matured fruit is purple and supposed to be poisonous. So that's why I didn't want to even try the young fruit before I know that's it is indeed a native cucumber. So this is the front yard of the garden that again is right by the curb, which is actually the public easement. I will show you my price of wax melon. Here we go. See how big it is. This thing is probably 15 pounds. It's humongous. I got 2 of them here. This area is way too shaded and it's on a slope, so it's quite dry. But there are a few things that actually still alive. That's a pecan tree that I didn't have time to dig it up. And you can see that compared to the other pecan tree, this is still very small. So the sun definitely make a difference. And these are the taro roots that I actually, in this area, I planted taro roots for several years, and this year I actually dug most of up. So what you see here are the one that I didn't see them, and then they sprouted. In summer, actually, they will dry up like this. Typically, I would harvest the stem for cooking already. But this year I just leave it like this. And I just noticed that some Dayton radish sprouted over here. So when the weather is cool, this is going to grow very vigorously. Hyacinth bean plant. Hyacinth beans like hot weather, and they usually start to flowering, so kind of like in the middle of the summer or later summer, maybe in September. Here are the strawberries that I planted right before the lockdown. These are chives. Again, they grow very well in spring and the fall. They don't like summer, even though it's under shade. They didn't grow much at all. So I leave it for now, and when the weather is cooler, I'm going to basically cut all the ones above the ground and then let the new shoots grow. And these, of course, are the amaryllis that kind of self-sprouted. And again, it's I believe we have been harvesting the young tips for cooking, and now it's setting fruit. So that means it's going to come back next year over here with new amaryllis for in spring. And that's a smaller young wax melon that kind of growing under there. Well, that's a quick tour of a garden that has been ignored for several months now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumb up. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it down below. If you have not done so, please hit the subscribe button to follow our journey with the East by West Farms.